China's central bank to cut the reserve requirement ratio for banks by 0.5 percentage point. Donald Trump wins the GOP New Hampshire primary as Nikki Haley vows to fight on. And China and the Pacific Island nation of Nauru restore diplomatic ties. Hello and welcome to TVB News. The People's Bank of China, the country's central bank, said today it will cut the amount of reserves banks are required to hold against their deposits to help boost a slowing economy. Pan Gongsheng, the central bank governor, said the reserve requirement ratio would be cut by 0.5 percentage points on February 5th. Pan said the cut would inject about 1 trillion yuan, or 141 billion US dollars, into the economy. The move appears to be part of a concerted effort to stabilize the markets and boost confidence in the economy. It prompted a surge in share prices, with Hong Kong's benchmark Hang Seng Index jumping 3.6%. Chinese stock markets have languished in recent months, with investors discouraged by a faltering recovery. The two-day-long Asian Financial Forum began today at the Hong Kong Convention and Exhibition Center, attracting more than 3,000 people. Chief Executive John Lee said participants, many of them from abroad, can visit the Palace Museum and take boat tours across Victoria Harbour for free to experience the city's unique blend of Eastern and Western cultures. The event marks the first in-person forum to be held since the pandemic. Participants include financial and political leaders from more than 40 countries. The CE stressed in the forum's opening speech that the SAR will continue to play a key part in developing the world economy and create new opportunities.
We are back to business and finance, to deal-making and day-to-day and day-to-night networking. Today, tomorrow, and I'm sure long down the road. And when I say we, I mean not only Hong Kong, but also the world. Under the one country, two systems principle, Hong Kong can create opportunities for companies and economies in Asia and around the world. There's so much more worth looking forward to while you are in Hong Kong. Bringing East and West together is central to Hong Kong's future in arts and culture, as well as business and finance. I invite you to see for yourself during your stay in Hong Kong, and we will make it easy for you.
Chief Executive John Lee will take part in the Legislative Council's Q&A session tomorrow, when he is expected to discuss with lawmakers the city's economy and major event hosting capabilities. Some members of the performing arts sector said the city lacks venues to host major events, limiting their development. This, as some representatives from the tourism sector suggested authorities create a timetable for major events for the year. Timothy Lee tells us more.
Samuel Lam has organized drone performances in both fashion and art shows in recent years. But he told TVB News how difficult it is for him to find suitable venues to host such events. He said he has to wait for more than half a year to organize performances in areas such as the West Kowloon Cultural District and the Hong Kong Cultural Center. Lam noted cities such as Macau and Shenzhen offer more facilities and are more supportive of his industry, making his peers less likely to host future performances in the SAR. Currently, most large-scale events or shows in the city are held at venues such as the Hong Kong Coliseum or Asia World Expo, while major sporting events are held at the Hong Kong Stadium. According to the Hong Kong Tourism Board website, the city will host at least 50 major events this year, including the Hong Kong Sevens Art Basel Fair as well as the Hong Kong Cyclothon. This, as some in the tourism sector suggested, authorities lay down a timetable for these events to help attract more tourists. Lawmaker Yu Pak-leung from the tourism constituency said those in the sector need to know what activities or which celebrities will come to the city beforehand in order to better prepare. Kenny Shui, a vice president on research at the think tank Our Hong Kong Foundation, urged policymakers to loosen the application process to help organizers of major events. Meanwhile, lawmaker Regina Ip suggested the government actively attract popular musicians to perform in the SAR. She mentioned U.S. pop star Taylor Swift did not pick Hong Kong as a stop of her world tour in Asia, but went to Singapore, so the SAR missed out on the opportunity. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
Former Next Digital CEO Chung Kim-hung today said his former boss, media tycoon Jimmy Lai, did not think Apple Daily English News required a balanced view, as its objective was to create a negative impression of China. Chung made the statement in court as part of his direct examination on the 15th day of Lai's national security trial. Lai had earlier pleaded not guilty to 1 count of sedition and 2 charges related to the national security law. Min Mo-sing-ai has details.
A heavy police presence outside the West Kowloon Law Courts. Prosecutor Anthony Chow carried on his direct examination of the former CEO of Next Digital, Chung Kim-hung. Chow focused on the editorial policy of the English edition of Apple Daily. Chung said Lai hoped the English edition, which was launched in May 2020, could become the lever between Apple Daily and U.S. politics. When High Court Judge Alex Lee asked about the meaning of the above phrase, Chung replied, to influence the public opinion of Americans in U.S. politics. The former Next Digital CEO said the English edition would include some translated articles selected from the Chinese version. Chung said among Lai's criteria regarding the article selection, the writers must hold yellow stands, which meant anti-government at the time, and perspectives that aligned with Apple Daily. Moreover, Lai said balanced reporting was not required in articles that were to be published in an English edition. He only wanted to provide a general view of the yellow side on matters to U.S. readers. Chung explained Lai had hoped the U.S. would take action to protect Hong Kong and Apple Daily, such as imposing sanctions against the SAR and central government. The prosecutor presented multiple WhatsApp messages obtained from group chat English News created by Lai on May 10, 2020. In a message sent by Lai to the group, he mentioned his assistant, Mark Simon. Chung said Simon was involved in several aspects of the operation of English News. For instance, Lai asked Simon to invite some prominent U.S. political figures to subscribe to the English edition, including the U.S. Vice President and Secretary of State at the time. Chung said Lai believed Apple Daily could receive maximum protection if those politicians became subscribers. Chung also said the editorial policy of the English News was to exclude positive news about China. In another message, Lai said the English articles should focus on anti-China sentiment amid the COVID-19 pandemic because this is what the Americans should read the most. The trial has been adjourned until Thursday, when the prosecution will play a talk show video.
Public sitting area in court was full today, and Jimmy Lai's family members were among those who came to watch the trial of the former media tycoon. Min Mo-sing-ai, TVB News.
It is understood that the public consultation on legislation under Article 23 of the Basic Law could start before the Lunar New Year. Secretary for Security Chris Tang today said the sooner the better. Tang said if the legislation work is completed earlier, there will be fewer days that the city faces risks. The government earlier said legislation on Article 23 will be completed this year without specifying whether it is the first or second half of the year. Former U.S. President Donald Trump cruised to victory in the Republican Party's New Hampshire primary, edging closer to a presidential election rematch against Joe Biden in November. With 90% of the ballots counted, Trump earned 54.6% of the votes, and his rival, Nikki Haley, 43.2%. Haley, though, has vowed to fight on, targeting her home state of South Carolina on February 24th. On the Democratic side, President Joe Biden won his party's primary in New Hampshire, but had to do so via a write-in effort. Nazvi Karim has more details.
Donald Trump devoted some of his New Hampshire victory speech to rival Nikki Haley's upbeat reaction to her defeat. The former president comfortably won the state's Republican primary, sweeping the first two contests of the 2024 primary season after last week's victory in Iowa.
I said, I can go up and I can say to everybody, oh, thank you for the victory, it's wonderful, or I can go up and say, who the hell was the imposter that went up on the stage before and claimed a victory? She did very poorly, actually. This is not your typical victory speech, but let's not have somebody take a victory when she had a very bad night.
Haley invested heavily in a New Hampshire campaign, targeting the state's relatively large voter base that doesn't identify as Republican or Democrat. The 52-year-old former South Carolina governor is ignoring GOP calls to leave the race and will fight on until at least the Super Tuesday primaries on March 5th, when 15 states and 1 territory go to the polls.
What a great night. God is so good all the time. New Hampshire is first in the nation. It is not the last in the nation. This race is far from over. There are dozens of states left to go. And the next one is my sweet state of South Carolina.
Also winning comfortably in New Hampshire was President Joe Biden, whose name was not on the Democratic Party ballot. Biden opted out after the party pushed for South Carolina on February 24th as its first primary. New Hampshire Democrats held its primary regardless, and voters were able to write Biden's name on the ballot. The president claimed almost 68% of the vote against U.S. Representative Dean Phillips and author Marianne Williamson. With the Trump-Biden election looking likely, the Associated Press's Josh Boak said the demographics could eventually work against Trump.
He benefited from the state's demographics. Most New Hampshire voters live in small towns or rural areas. Trump dominated in that segment. Most of them lack a college degree. He won about 2/3 of that group. Most identify as conservative. He won 7 out of 10 in that group. The one area where we saw him lacking was among voters with a college degree. Those voters mainly backed Nikki Haley, the former South Carolina governor. And that could matter a lot in November's general election.
Nazvi Karim, TVB News.
China and Nauru have formally restored diplomatic relations after the Pacific Island nation cut its ties with Taipei earlier this month. Foreign Minister Wang Yi met with Nauru's Minister for Foreign Affairs and Trade, Lionel Ajimeya, in Beijing today. Wang said the resumption of ties once again demonstrates that adherence to the One China principle is an irresistible historical trend. Ajimeya said Nauru recognized that Taiwan is part of China and that it looks forward to future cooperation. Nauru first established diplomatic ties with Taiwan in 1980, then switched to Beijing in 2002, and then back to Taipei in 2005. Taiwan now has official ties with 11 countries and the Vatican. Still ahead, efforts to get Israel and Hamas closer to an agreement on a temporary truce. Atomic scientists keep the doomsday clock set as close to midnight as ever before. And 3 people sent to hospital after an electric heater fire at Meifu, Sunchun. Welcome back. There seems to be a significant move towards a temporary truce between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. Israel is heavily attacking the town of Khan Yunis, but after substantial Israeli fatalities this week, a deal is on the table which could lead to a 30-day pause in fighting. David Garrett reports.
There have been many false dawns when it comes to a ceasefire in Gaza. After more than 100 days of fighting with a short respite in November, once again a temporary truce could be agreed between Israel and Hamas. Israel is coming under increasing pressure from home and abroad to pause the war. Families of those held hostage in Gaza are demanding action. Monday saw the death of 24 Israeli troops, 21 of them reservists. Israeli Chief of Staff Herzi Halevi visited the site of one of the deadliest attacks on their forces during the conflict. Halevi said lessons will be learned from an investigation. But as family, friends and colleagues attended funerals for dead soldiers, pressure mounts on Israel and a month-long ceasefire could be near. Intense mediation efforts are working towards a deal. Reportedly, Israel has proposed a ceasefire in which hostages held by Hamas would be freed in exchange for the release of Palestinians imprisoned by Israel, and top Hamas leaders in Gaza will be allowed to go abroad. But reports say there is disagreement on how post-war Gaza should be managed.
And Hamas's leaders do not want to leave Gaza. They want assurances that they can remain after the fighting ends. Now, for the time being, there's no agreement. Egypt and Qatar, who both serve as mediators between the warring sides, are trying to bridge the gaps. For the time being, heavy fighting continues.
Dozens of Palestinians have been killed in the latest bombardment by Israel in Khan Yunis. 7 were buried in nearby Rafah at this funeral. The city is said to be under siege. Israel say they have killed 100 terrorists. On the wider diplomatic front, the United Nations chief warned Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that his continued rejection of a two-state solution will prolong tensions.
I urge all parties to step back from the brink and to consider the horrendous human cost of a regional conflict. Beyond the need for immediate de-escalation, each situation demands the implementation of a clear political roadmap that would contribute to long-term regional stability.
At the meeting of the UN Security Council, Iran blamed the US for prolonging the war.
The United States repeatedly expresses its grave concern about the spillover of tension in the region, and yet continues its full support to the Israeli regime, war machine.
The White House says they are helping negotiate a peace deal.
Brett is in the region. He was in Cairo today, as a matter of fact, and he'll have other stops along the way. Certainly one of the things he's in the region talking about is the potential for another hostage deal. Again, I don't want to get ahead of where we are or give you, I can't give you odds on if and when we'll be able to get there. Thank you.
David Garrett, TVB News.
It's only 90 seconds to the end of the world, according to the scientists in charge of the doomsday clock. The bulletin of the atom scientists on Tuesday kept the symbolic clock at 90 seconds to midnight, the theoretical point of global annihilation. At a briefing in Washington, the nonprofit group said current trends continue to point to a global catastrophe. Factors include countries such as the United States, Russia, and China engaged in nuclear weapons escalation, Russia's continuing war in Ukraine, Israel's war in Gaza, and climate change. The doomsday clock was created in 1947 amid Cold War tensions to warn people how close mankind was to destroying the world.
Joining us from India. In 2023, trends continue to point ominously towards global catastrophe. The war in Ukraine poses an ever-present risk of nuclear escalation, and the October 7 attack in Israel and war in Gaza provides further illustration of the horrors of modern war, even without nuclear escalation. Last year, we expressed amplified concern by moving the clock to 90 seconds to midnight, the closest to global catastrophe it has ever been. The risks of last year continue with unabated ferocity and continue to shape this year. Today, we once again set the doomsday clock to express a continuing and unprecedented level of risk.
The cold weather warning remains in force. Temperatures in the urban area hovered around 7 degrees Celsius in the early morning, while it was a few degrees lower in the New Territories. But unlike yesterday, no frost formations were found at the city's highest mountain, Taimo Shan, this morning. At Taimo Shan and Tate's Cairn, low temperatures of around -0.3 degrees were recorded during the early morning. Weather authorities said the cold weather is here to stay due to the effects of an intense winter monsoon. Higher temperatures of up to 12.5 degrees were recorded this afternoon, but the frost warning was issued at 4:30 p.m. Frost may form on high ground or the northern New Territories tomorrow morning. 3 women were injured and sent to hospital after an old-style electric heater was suspected to have caused a fire at Meifu Sanchuan this morning. The outer wall of the apartment on Humbert Street was blackened by soot. The unit's 59-year-old female owner and her 2 daughters, aged 27 and 30, were sent to hospital after inhaling smoke. More than 30 residents had to be evacuated from the building. Preliminary investigations indicated the blaze was caused by an overheated electric heater, which ignited a nearby blanket. That is the news. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.